I'm NASA Public Affairs Specialist Brandi Dean. On November 2nd, 2000, the very first expedition crew arrived at the International Space Station, and since then there have been an unbroken string of 241 astronauts from 19 countries on board supporting science experiments, performing spacewalks, and teaching us how to live long-term in space. But although the crew members in space might be the most visible piece of that puzzle, they are only a tiny percentage of the many, many people who have to work together to make sure missions are safe and successful. We're here today with some of the people that work on the ground, and in particular through our Flight Operations Directorate. And we have a few International Space Station program stowaways here with us as well. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves and tell a little bit about what they do. And then in honor of the anniversary we're celebrating, I'd love for each of you to also tell us where you were 20 years ago when Expedition 1 was just beginning. And we are going to start first with Norm Knight.
Well, let's see, Brandi. It's really an exciting day, and it's great to be on this panel. A little bit of my background. I've worked in flight ops for many years. I'm currently the Deputy Director of Flight Operations. You know, thinking back 20 years ago, which some days it seems like yesterday, and some days it seems like a long, long time ago, I had been a group lead for one of the shuttle groups that managed the main engines, solid rocket boosters, and external tank, and was recently selected as a flight director. So I was really transitioning from shuttle to station. So exciting times, exciting memories, and look forward to the rest of the panel discussion today.
Definitely. Thank you, Norm. Now we're going to go to Kenny Todd.
Hey, good morning, Brandi, and good morning to the rest of my esteemed colleagues on the panel. It's good to see all of you. I'm the Deputy Program Manager for the International Space Station, have been for a number of years here, but work very closely with the entire flight operations community and have done so for close to the last 20 years now. When I think back to where we were, where I was 20 years ago, obviously I wasn't in this position, but at the time, my focus was over in avionics and software. And one of the biggest challenges for a program such as this one, where you have hardware, literally being built all over the United States and in other parts of the world by different countries, one of the challenges was trying to figure out how to integrate all that hardware and software. And there was a big effort in that time frame back ending the last century when we were really starting to get this program off the ground and in orbit. And so at that time, I had one camp working real-time operations on the avionics and software side, and making sure everything was going okay on orbit as we started to bring up these different systems. And at the same time, I was off trying to figure out the next flights in the queue and how to make sure that we were all going to be good to go, and trying to find problems on the ground so we didn't have to find them and give them to these flight directors later on when they have to deal with them. And again, good to see everybody.
I'm sure they appreciate that early work. Next up is Holly Ridings.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Holly Ridings. Today, I am the Chief Flight Director in the Flight Operations Directorate, and it is pretty exciting to sit here today, after 20 years and look back, see some of the same faces on this panel and really have an opportunity to celebrate everything that we've done. And so today I'm the Chief Flight Director, but if you go back 20 years, I was just starting out at NASA as a flight controller, just newly minted, and was able to sit console for the very, very beginning of Space Station. And so for a while, I would tell everyone I had the entire history of Space Station in my head, and now it's gotten so complicated I don't think I can remember it all. But for a while I could go flight by flight, and that was how I organized my whole life. Not birthdays, not holidays. Space Station flights were the milestones, and really still are, actually. That's kind of how we mark time in our world. So super exciting to be here, and hope you enjoy what we talk about today.
Thank you. Next, let's go to Emily Nelson.
Good morning, and hey to everybody. So let's see, right now I'm the Deputy Chief Flight Director in the Flight Operations Directorate, and we're still also active flight directors. 20 years ago, I was also starting out as a junior flight controller. The Expedition 1 launch marked a transition where one role that we had early on was going to retire because the space station, which had actually been in orbit for a while, was going to have people on it. And so we were going to retire one position and move into a full team. So I was excited to be transitioning into additional responsibility and getting maybe to become a little bit more senior as a flight controller someday. But I was a pretty baby flight controller back at that point in time.
That's so cool. How about we go to David Korth next?
Hey, good morning. It's good to be back among friends. I hung up my flight director spurs several years ago. So now I'm the deputy manager of the ISS Avionics software division, what Kenny was doing 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was sitting console in what we call the Blue Ficker, a much smaller version of what's behind Emily right now. And I was the lead planner for Expedition 1. And so, I look back and I was reflecting this last couple of days on what we've accomplished since then and thinking, how much preparation went into Expedition 1. And as Emily mentioned, the uncrewed station that existed for a year and a half, 2 years before the Expedition 1 crew showed up, and how much work, effort we all put into working with the Russians, trying to come up with what the plans were going to be, how we're going to integrate things together. And when we finally cut our first plan and uplinked, that's when it hit us. This is real. This is actually happening. And clearly a lot has transpired, both with all of our partners and the vehicle itself and the evolution of operations. So I'm glad to be part of this group today.
Must have been such an exciting time. Finally, we're going to go to Pooja Jesrani.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here with all of you. Like Brandi mentioned, my name is Pooja Jesrani, and I am a flight director. I was selected in 2018, so I'm one of the newer flight directors in our office. I was selected with 5 others, making a class of 6. And so I am one of the baby flight directors, you would say, but have had a lot of experience now at NASA. In 2000, I was in 11th grade. I was in 11th grade and had a lot of space posters in my room, and was very inspired by space and wanted to be where I am today. So very excited to be here. Thank you. I saw a lot of head shaking with the 11th grade, but.
Yes, this is already so much fun. So now we're going to back up a little bit. Although a lot of this group supports flight operations and mission control, that's not everything that flight operations does by a long shot. So Norm, since you're the Deputy Director of Flight Operations, why don't you give us an overview of what Flight Operations Directorate is?
Okay, Brandi, in 11th grade, goodness, that's a shocker. So flight operations, we live in a lot of acronyms. So you hear FOD, it's synonymous with flight operations. It's Flight Operations Directorate. And really what we are is a service organization for all the major programs for development and mission execution. And so what I'll talk a little bit about and give you an overview today is really for station, but it does support all programs. And, the program is our customer. We're an org of about 2,500 people. And we have 3 major functions within flight ops. You could think of us as kind of like a tripod. One leg of that is our astronauts. We have about 47 active astronauts today. The other leg is aircraft operations. We call it AOD. And we have about 60% of the aviation assets for the agency within flight ops. We have 19 T-38s that are used for spaceflight readiness training. We have a cargo transport, the big guppy you've probably seen flying around. We have some high research aircraft used for science and training. And then we have a Gulfstream 3 and a Gulfstream 5, which are used to transport the crews home after landing and get them back reunited with their family. And then we have the plan, train, fly part of the organization, which is really the biggest part of FOD, although it all works together. But really that plan, train, fly is what we do for the program. We we really start planning and training each of these ISS increments, which are about 6 months long, about a year and a half out. And the teams work very hard to take the program requirements, metabolize those into a plan, a very detailed plan of how to accomplish this. We train the astronauts, we train the flight controllers, we integrate the teams, and we get ready to go in and execute that in the real-time environment. And that plan really starts from when the astronauts leave their families to go to launch, all through all activities on orbit to the time that they come back to Earth and are reunited again with their families. Where you see a lot of this really culminate is in the Mission Control Center. Many of you have probably seen Mission Control, whether you've seen it in person or in photos. That's the command and control center for the International Space Station. These teams work 24/7, 365 days a year. The flight director is really the conductor in these real-time teams, managing all the systems on board. And the purpose of the teams in there is to manage the systems and also provide crew safety for this orbiting laboratory in real time. The teams typically send about 30,000 remote control commands from the ground to the space station a month to manage this platform. So it's very interactive, it's hands-on, it's tactile, and it's very rewarding. Flight operations were very rich in tradition. We have our foundations of what we call foundations of mission operations. They're leadership tenets, not unique to FOD, as we say, but really for any effort that requires leadership. It's discipline, confidence, competence, toughness, teamwork, vigilance, and responsibility. And it's these leadership attributes that define our culture. And this culture, in addition to the flight rules and procedures, is really what provides the framework for the critical decisions and the operations that are on.
Dry, boring voices, because that's what we do on console when things go wrong. And I'm not sure it quite conveys, the situation to folks out there. But I decided I'd try a little bit. So hopefully people understand that, that's our equivalent of heart pounding, where we have these very calm faces and sort of monotone tones, because that's what we're trained to do.
Yeah, and just to add some color commentary to that one, I remember that day because I was with a team that was doing a training run upstairs, and word spread that, because it was pretty unusual for Progress to not dock totally normally. And so word had spread upstairs into this, and we pretty much just everybody took a pause and we moved our data from our simulation training data to the real-time data to just kind of follow along, with bated breath from upstairs to see what are they going to do? How are they going to solve the problem? We had a whole team that was following along that really, yes, when you describe it technically and in the moment, you can't get all, we don't make it a big, exciting event. But I will tell you that from another room in the building having nothing whatsoever to do with the op, we were all watching because it was a kind of a really scary event.
And let's see, Brandi, I'll jump in kind of from a program perspective. I don't sit and do the actual console work, but I look at from a programmatic perspective. We've asked the flight ops team, take care of the crew, take care of the ISS, and if something goes wrong, my perspective is get us through the shift, get us stable, and then we'll step back as an integrated group, take a look and see what our options are, try to figure out how to go forward. And at least one of the examples that I can think of, and maybe one of y'all can help me remember, for some reason I think it was 12A or 13A, we had a shuttle dock to station. And for whatever reason, the Russians had a computer failure. And we thought, oh, no big deal. And then they had another computer failure. And you're like, well, that's unfortunate for those guys. And then you realize, well, that's really unfortunate for all of us because we need them in order to be able to stabilize the station so the shuttle can leave. And we had absolutely no clue as to what happened with the Russian computers. The Russians didn't really have a good understanding. There was a lot of concern, I'll put it that way, because we were really in a situation where we couldn't keep shuttle forever trying to figure out what to do. We were concerned about overall maintaining attitude control. Should we try to undock and not have these computers that could control the propulsive systems? Pooja, you probably remember this. But anyway, I just remember that was a very concerning time for us at the program level, because we were still building station. We were still quite a ways from being done. And to have a problem like this, where you're really looking at each other going, how are we going to get out of this? I mean, this could, be a step in a very bad direction if we try to let a shuttle go and not have a good way of ensuring that we can clear it from the station without any kind of a contact. So it was at least over a period of days, it was something I think a lot of us lost sleep over, working with the entire team, engineering, our operations team, our safety communities, our partners, our Russian partners, trying to figure out, because it wasn't just as simple as rebooting that computer and bringing it back up. That it was a much more involved technical issue that again, kind of felt like it brought us to our knees there for a period of days. And I assume some of you might have remembered that one.
Yeah, so I'll pick up for just a few minutes, because I was actually on console. I worked that mission from the flight director console. It was actually my very first joint mission. So I'd been certified before that and had worked space station shifts, but that was my first joint mission on the ISS flight director team. So I came in, I was the crew overnight shift. We put the crew to bed. And I came in, and the lead of our team said, well, we're in free drift and we can't figure out how to get out of it. We needed the computers on the space station to work and then be able to hand back and forth in terms of the shuttle taking overall control of the combined space station shuttle. But we were trying to get back to where the space station, took control of that. Like Kenny said, we couldn't have the shuttle do that forever. And so I came in, and we're free drift, and we don't know how to get out of it. But here's the lesson I learned, right? So one of the more senior flight directors was the lead, and she looked at me and said, okay, so while we're figuring out how to get out of free drift, what else can you do? We actually needed to move the mobile transporter, which is a piece of equipment where the robotic arm can ride up and down the length of the space station, to set up for an operation the next day. So, as a new flight director, you're kind of like, okay, here's our problem. She was looking up and out like, hey, let's keep moving forward safely while we're still solving this really bad problem over here. And it was, in my early flight director career, one of the most important lessons that I've learned. What can you do to move forward, even when faced with a problem that right now you don't know how to solve? How do you move forward, safely, of course? And so we moved the mobile transporter, because we had to be free drift to do that anyway. We happened to already be free drift while we're over here trying to figure out how to solve the problem. The other piece of that is, when you have a problem that big, everyone just shows up. Like, it's amazing. You don't have to make phone calls. People just know. Like Emily was saying earlier, the team in the other room is looking at the data. Everybody's at home watching NASA TV. People are getting things on their phones now more than they used to, because phones are a little more prevalent now. But the data just gets out, and people just show up. What can I do to help? And we formulate what's called a team 4, where you have another set of folks go really, really focus on that problem, leaving us in the control room, again, to continue flying the mission as much progress as we could make safely. So, those are like two of my biggest flight director lessons that I carry with me from that specific incident that Kenny brought up.
I'll just add one quick thing. So I actually started at NASA about 2 weeks after that shuttle flight. And it was the biggest buzz in town. I mean, the amount of conversations that happened after that shuttle flight and all the things that the team had done to recover. I mean, that was sort of getting my feet wet and really learning all about what FOD does. It was a great experience to start learning from.
Yeah, that's so cool. I feel like we could listen to your battle stories for a long time, but I know you've got other things to get to today, but I did want to wrap up a little bit by talking kind of about how flight operations directorate is still evolving as we have new programs coming online. I know Holly, you supported the first SpaceX cargo mission, and Pooja, I think, is getting ready to support the first Boeing commercial crew mission as well. So maybe you guys could talk a little bit about how we're adapting to those new demands.
Yeah, so you could probably do an entire panel on just that topic, right? Kenny was there as well. Norm was sitting behind me. So I was the flight director, the NASA flight director, sitting in the ISS, flight control room, responsible for the very first Dragon that came to the space station. So this is 2012. To put that in perspective, we've now done over 20 of those, if you count that demonstration, headed into the 21st under the space station cargo contract. So, I mean, 2-ish a year for the last, almost 10 years now. So amazing to see how far we've come. When you sit there the first time, we talked about this when we talked about Expedition 1, right? You've put all this blood, sweat, and tears, planning, trying to figure out how to do this. Again, Kenny remembers all of this, and then you go live, and it doesn't work exactly like you'd planned, and that's where we really get to do our jobs. That's what they pay us for, right? Is to figure those things out. And so we got about 120 meters from the space station, and our navigation sensors that communicated with the SpaceX Dragon didn't look quite right. So we got to sit there for a little while and figure out how we were gonna manage that in order to get the two vehicles to communicate and navigate in safely. And ultimately we did figure it out. It's another one of those stories where literally heart pounding, but when you tell it afterwards, it's like, okay, well, we sat there and calmly worked through it. We had our engineering support, we had the program folks, Kenny was in the other room, Norm's sitting behind me. And we figured out what to do and do it safely, and we're able to bring the vehicle in. We did have to sit, 120 meters from the space station for a while, making sure our navigation sensors were working correctly between the two vehicles. And so, from my standpoint, you look back, and now where we are with commercial is really amazing. A tipping point in human spaceflight for us to be able to incorporate a commercial partner and bring them safely into the space station. But to us, right, who started, at the beginning of the space station, it was just another opportunity, right? We had done Expedition 1. We had figured out how to incorporate, over time, all of our international partners, add their modules and their vehicles to the space station. And this was just one more in a continuum. And so we look forward now with all of the pieces that we continue to do on space station and, on into Artemis. And for us, that's, continuing to build on the skills and the culture. At the end of the day, it's about relationships and teamwork and trust. And you go and you figure out that combination with every partner, with every provider, with every team that we interact with. And, that's really the amazing thing to me about the International Space Station, one of the most amazing things. And so, again, I could talk forever, but, Kenny and Norm were there as well, so I'll hand to them.
Well, I'll provide just one aspect of it that Holly hit on, and it's the teamwork and it's relationships. And it was a fantastic day to get Dragon birthed, but if you look at the journey to get there, that was really what made it special, because the commercial cargo came on the heels of the Constellation program being canceled, NASA diverting funds from government type work into more of the private and commercial industries, to where NASA buys a service instead of actually building a vehicle. So that was the forefront of that. And I'll tell you that the dynamics between commercial and NASA and government at that point was pretty toxic. It was, NASA funding has gone down. It was given to commercial. It was just, the timing was bad and the environment was not great. And it really took, Holly and her team and Kenny and the programs to really start helping build trust, as Holly said, because we were doing a lot of finger pointing back and forth, and it was getting us nowhere. And until, those relationships started to be built, the trust started to be instilled in that you need us, and NASA recognizes that we needed them as well. We're not the enemy. We're the solution. So are they. And we have to work together. So we started focusing, instead of pointing at each other, we're pointing now at a common goal, that common goal of successful commercial cargo. And that is the foundation, and the success of that is the foundation we're resting on today with Commercial Crew. It's what we're going into with the Gateway and Human Landing System, and it all goes back to that. So leadership matters, relationships matter, and people and trust matter. So just a great success story.
I see, and Norm, absolutely, I agree with you and Holly both. I mean, if we look back at when Station started, did we know that we were going to end up in this model? Not necessarily. I mean, we sort of had to adapt the mission along the way based on the guidance and direction that we've been given. And again, that brought some new people into our circle that we didn't know about when we started this. But one thing I talk to people about up and out a lot is the fact that we have a space station culture. There's not, every partner, whether it's commercial or whether it's international, everybody brings their aspect of how to do things and how to look at problems and how to look at challenges and how to accomplish things in their own way. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out how to make that work with everybody else. And what ultimately comes out of that mixer, if you will, is a space station culture. And we understand each other. I like to tell people, the technical problems don't really know international boundaries. They don't know contractual boundaries. They are problems. You solve them the same way. The physics doesn't change just because you talk a different language. And so you have to get together. You have to figure out how to work together to do that. And we did it early on with the partners, our international partners. And I think with our commercial friends, we're starting to see that same thing as both Holly and Norm talked about. The early part, that storming, forming, norming thing, that there was a little bit of storming early on, and it took us a little bit, but I think in the end, we had arrived at kind of a cultural understanding of how to get things done, and it's been extremely successful. And I think it's going to carry us forward, as Norm said, as we start to not just work with international partners, but also commercial partners, and trying to go live around the moon and go do some work on the moon.
Yeah, and Brandi. I was just going to mention that I think this is also just a very exciting time for younger generations. The last time we flew off of U.S. soil was in 2011 for our last shuttle flight. And so to get to see DM2 this summer fly, it was the buzz around town. It was the buzz around the world, to get to see these astronauts go to the International Space Station and fly off of U.S. soil. And I think the SpaceX team is doing an outstanding job. And we have a flight coming up in the next few weeks, as well as Boeing working really hard to do the same thing. So I think, the next few years are going to be super exciting.
Definitely. A lot of excitement these past 20 years and a lot more excitement to come. I think we are just about pretty much out of time, but I did want to give Norm a chance to just kind of wrap up for us a little bit what we've talked about today.
Well, Brandi, great discussion, great panel. And, I don't know how many folks have had the opportunity to go out and see an ISS viewing, where you go out and look in the night sky, early morning sky, and see station fly over. But if you've not had that opportunity, go do so, because, station didn't happen on its own. It was, one vote in Congress. It took a lot of teams to put this orbiting outpost in orbit. And so when you look up at this magnificent laboratory that's the size of a football field, it's nearly 1 million pounds of mass in orbit, orbiting the Earth about every 90 minutes. You realize it's real. There's human presence on board. There's been human presence for the last 20 years. And, it really is an engineering marvel. And to me, miracles, miracles do happen when you have a vision. You provide the leadership, the perseverance, the political support, and teams that manage this thing day in and day out, and have been doing that for the past 20 years. It's incredible. And, it's a great orbiting laboratory for science and research, and it's also being used as a great platform for developing hardware that's going to evolve us to the moon and Mars and beyond. So this is amazing. 20 years has gone by in a blink of an eye, but the relationships and the teams that have made this all happen are what's going to evolve us to getting on the moon by 2024 and making that a reality as well. So I think I can speak for all of us that, being part of this is just really special, and just really glad to be here today with our friends and see just what this has become and how it's evolving even into the future. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you so much, Norm. That's a great idea. Definitely go out and wave at Kate, Sergey, and Sergey as they are flying over. And then later this month, you'll get a chance to cheer on the Crew 1 crew as they launch to the space station on our SpaceX Dragon as well. This is just the second in a series of 6 panels, so you're going to want to watch out for the rest of this series. Coming up is going to be all about science. That's the next one that we'll be holding, so you can watch out for that. Thank you so much for joining us today, and here's to 20 more years.
Throughout my career at the European Space Agency, I passed many significant events in ESA's history. Milestones, first attempts, landmarks.